Torah 69 in Likutei Moharan, a Torah that's been dealing with many difficult concepts concerning theft, family, children, and the personal, spiritual demise of a person who steals not only money, but he steals wives, he steals children, he steals inheritance. And such a person, you wonder, well, how can such a person do tshuva? Of course, if a person's alive, he can do tshuva. There's never an end to saying, I'm sorry, to the great, merciful creator of this universe. If we're alive, that means there's a chance. Tonight, the Rebbe ends this Torah with a further description of the spiritual state of such a person and, well, what happens to him and why. And he's going to be playing with several synonyms, words that have multiple meanings based on the root letters of the words. So you have to follow it closely, word by word, and I'll try to point it out as smoothly as possible and not help us get more lost, because it's a bit of a maze. So he says now that we're going to begin in the top of the last paragraph, about halfway down. But it's the top of the column, that there is this idea that the gates of wisdom are granted to people in order that they can be drawing other people closer to Hashem. Hashem doesn't just give us wisdom so that we can get richer or smarter, in our ivory tower. Hashem grants wisdom in order that we're able to help other people get closer to Hashem, because that's the purpose of creation, is that all creation draws back to its source and then reveals the light of the Creator in the source. And that's to bring them back to Hashem Yitbarach. And he brings a verse to support the idea from King Shlomo. Shachu re'im lifnei tovim. That friends will talk before good people. Good people, friends. They draw other good people around them. Real friends. Not friends in a mafia or friends gathered around other not good things. Urashaim, the verse goes on, well, where do they gather? Al Sharei Tzaddik. They like to wait around where the tzaddik is. How could that be? What does that mean? The Rashaim, there aren't too, well, I'm not going to go into that statistic. But the Rebbe says they gather around the gate of the tzaddik. Why? Because the tzaddik is the place of the light. And the Rashaim, whether they know it or not, are looking for the light, even if they're in darkness. Dafka, specifically because they're in darkness. And why? Well, why are they gathered there? Ultimately, it's the good in the Rasha that's gathering him before the really good people, and he gets his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, is shechted by being around good people. In other words, we lose our desire to do the wrong things when we're around good people. And if we're around not good people, well, the opposite is true. So there's a subtext here, a subcurrent going on in the way the Rebbe's reading the mind of the Rasha, and of course the verse itself from King Solomon. So waiting around the gate of the tzaddik doesn't necessarily mean that he's there for good things, but he's there because ultimately he's going to get his Yetzer Hara readjusted. Maybe that's a better idea than shechted. Because you can't shecht an angel. Angels don't die. Right now, they do lose their irrelevance when they've done their mission. But the evil inclination of every human being is an angel mamish, and it has a purpose, and we cannot shech them, kill them, slaughter them. But we can rehabilitate them if we've learned enough skills for that job, and that's why we're here now. Tzarich Lavi Rashaim al Shari Tzaddik, and we need to bring these evil people to the gate of the tzaddik, because there, he's going to get his treatment. And this happens to thousands of people when there's a great tzaddik around, and it's happened over many generations in many places. Suddenly, the least likely person to show up at the gates of the Babachur Rebbe's house, or Rebbe Nachman's house, or the Gaon's house, or whatever tzaddik you like, or Baba Sali, people came from from low places with big pockets full of money, even, because they knew there was something by this righteous person that they needed. Now, okay, everything's good so far. We understand. And now, the Rebbe jumps. We have this concept of excess mental power, excess hair as the symbol of mental power. Right? I guess you can see that I'm not, I don't have any excess mental power. But that fell out a long time ago. I think that was Grandpa's jeans. Grandpa's Levi's, right? Now, but these Roshaim that come to the gate of the tzaddik, they're called his excess. They're not the inner circle, they're not the second circle or the third circle of the followers that create the force field called a Hasidic group. They're the ones on the fringe. But they're there. And he calls them here, they're the Motre Mochin. Because why? This idea of the hair, the Nimtza Shehasarot Shelachacham, that these hairs, think of them like his extensions, mental extensions from the mind of the great down to the mind of the fallen. And these mental extensions called hair here, which notice again, the word shar is the same as the word sa'ar, hair. The hair is a gateway to a person's mind. Now, isn't that interesting? So it gives a new light to the type of haircut people use, However, these sa'arot of the Hacham, they're called shar, the gate, biyamin, on the right side. That is the gate to kindness, the gate to mercy, from the right side of the tree of life, which we all have repeated many times, that the left side of the tree of life is constriction and the right side is expansion. And we want to live in the stream of expansion. Now, constriction is important to be in this world, but just the right amount, not too much and not too little. About Etzel Rasha HaKasil, but when we talk about a fool, a foolish evil person, a fool who's seduced by the evil inclination over and over, Hem Asarot Mamash, they are Mamash hair, Bismol, which is the idea of the left side. Bechinat Lev Hacham Lemino, the heart of the right man leans to the right. And the Lev Kasil is smaller, but the heart of the fool always leans towards the left, which is like hype, excess energy, excess enthusiasm in the wrong things, in the wrong times, in the wrong places. That's a fool. And about this, our sages taught him in Masechet Kiddushin. Listen closely. This is a very deep verse from the Talmud. Hanose isha she'ena hogenet lo. Somebody who marries a woman who is not fitting for his spiritual level. What do you mean? Fitting for his spiritual level. How do we even know such a thing? Well, you could start if you want. It's a difficult, subtle business. But is your husband or your wife on your level? Well, how is your detail with the mitzvot? How is your dedication to prayer? How is your level of kindness? And so a good couple, they're close to each other on these things, or at least they get that way after living together for a while. But if one person, the couple, wants to do things that are outside the halacha, and one wants to keep the halacha, that's a big problem. And it involves many deep things, and not just little things about how you wash your hands, or how many hours you wait after you eat meat to eat cheese. Those are important halachot in the everyday business of Judaism. But when it comes to a couple making it or breaking it, it's not the cheese that's going to break the story, friends. It's going to be the lack of understanding that we need to be together on this thing called the journey of Jewish life. Okay, but a man who marries a woman he knows is below himself. Let's say he's a guy that went to yeshiva, and he gets soft on yeshiva. He's not so interested in being yeshiva. He wants to make money. And then he meets a woman who, maybe she'll keep Shabbat, maybe she won't. Maybe she'll go to the mikveh, maybe she won't. Maybe she's not even interested in milk or meat. Now, such a woman is clearly not going to be fitting for a guy who's trying to keep the laws of the Torah, even if he's not the biggest rabbi on the block. And all of this is very interestingly extrapolated and reversed for a woman too. Because a woman has to know her own service, and she has to know where she has influence over a man. Because we know that Leah, the tzedekis, the matriarch of Judaism, one of them, that she was destined to marry a Rasha, Esav. And she wept about it until God had mercy on her, and he did a little switcheroo under the chuppah on the night that Jacob was supposed to marry Rachel, and he married Leah. That was all because of Leah's prayers, because she didn't want to marry Esav. And she did not perceive that I could lift this guy up. And there are men that a woman can lift up, believe me. And there are women that can't lift up certain men. And that makes trouble. That makes divorces. Okay. The Talmud, being a male author document with a lot of great women inside, but it's going to be a little bit male-centered. It tells about the man who marries a woman who's not fitting for him. What is it? The Gemara goes on to tell us a very strange thing. Eliyahu kofato, Eliyahu bends him over, as if Eliyahu, he doesn't have more things to do in heaven than come down to earth and bend over this guy. And then what? Hashem rotza'o. The end of the pasuk. Hashem applies lashes to the guy that goes down to marry a woman that's not at his already attained spiritual level. It's a little scary. Lashes, if you ever saw the lash that they use for lashes, it looks more like a leather stump. It's very thick, and it's not something you want to get hit with once, much less 39 times. Okay. So this man now is engaging both the greatest of prophets and the Creator himself because of this problem. Now, he goes on to explain, because when he marries a woman who's not on his level, certainly he's not going to be happy with his portion. He's going to wake up one day and say, what did I do? He's going to wake up one day and say, I married somebody who's not going to help me do what I need to do in this world. And Dafka, the Rebbe now connects back to an earlier connection, because a woman is a garment of a man's blessing. She carries the money card from heaven. It's called Bina in heaven, and down here, it flowers into a bank account. And so a woman is a man's blessing of money. And if he marries below his level, he's not going to be happy with his wife, and he's also not going to be happy with the money. Now, some people are very happy with the money they have and some aren't. There's this imagination in some people's minds that you can only be happy when you have a lot. And that's false. And that's unhealthy. But there is a certain amount that everybody needs, and there's been a lot of studies done on this. A recent study showed that when people make less money than they need, they're unhappy. There's a certain amount that everybody needs to break even every month, maybe put a little bit on the side for vacation. And then there's the people who make a ton of money, and then there's the people in the between that make just what they need and a little more, and they're happy. They have their needs met. They're not out striving to get more than they need. And those people are happy. The people that are wealthy are not necessarily happy at all. Now, that's another whole complex. I did a whole series on money on my Patreon site. You're invited to visit that. And it's like 12 shiurim about all different aspects of money through the lens of Likutei Moharan and the Kabbalah. But for our purposes here, we understand when a man is not reaching up, when he marries a woman, a man should marry a woman who's higher than him, who has more fear, awe of heaven, more knowledge of the right way to live. That's what a guy needs to keep on the track. Now, because otherwise Eliyahu is going to come and Hashem's going to bring the strap, and it's not going to be pretty. Now, but what's going to happen? He's not going to be happy not only with his wife, but with his money, and also it goes out further because he can even be unhappy with his children if he's a sort of person to blame, if you know what I mean. This is something we see now. The Rebbe goes on, but Eshet No'arav, he's referring usually to the first wife, the wife that we marry when we're young, and, well, a little more innocent, a little more less experienced, a little more starry-eyed, and he's going to lose his appreciation for her. And he's actually choosing a mate who's not his true mate. Because she's not fitting for him. And, being in the therapy business, I could tell you I've seen a lot of unhappy marriages. And, when you've been around it enough, you can tell something is not matching. The mesh of the mind is not happening because the male mind and the female mind are designed to fit together. A man is supposed to be strong in wisdom, and a woman is supposed to be strong in understanding. And the two, they create a oneness where the divine presence dwells. That's really how it works. And that's why there's so much joy at the chuppah and so much sadness at the get, God forbid, because the get is like a spiritual surgery to separate these two souls that were joined together. And the joining is in the mind first, long before the body. And the heart is a fickle entity that passes in emotions all the time. Love is not the standard. The standard is respect. Okay. But for our purposes, we understand here that this man is no longer happy with his wife, with his money, with even his children. And guess what? Alzel onsho, and about this he gets punished. Kihu Baal Se'ar, because Eliyahu comes to give him punishment because Eliyahu is called the master of the hair. Eliyahu had long hair not because he was at Woodstock, but because he was a Nazir. He was a person who made a vow not to cut his hair, not to drink wine, not to eat grapes, not even to go into a vineyard. And so this level of spirituality is very high and very strict. And Eliyahu Hanavi was also a Kohen on top of that. And so he was called by the rabbis the Baal Se'ar because he had this long hair. Now, but remember, the hair is the excess of the mind, the excess of desires, the excess of thinking. And it's what we already equated to being related to the channels between the tzaddik's mind and the people that are far away from him, which is Rabbi Nachman, a big chidush of Rabbi Nachman here. Shememune alzeh, because Eliyahu is appointed this job. Now, this is not a very honorable position for the great prophet Elijah, Eliyahu to receive. Now, who wants to be the guy that pushes the guy over so he gets lashes? That's another story, because he's involved in many difficult things in his career. And about this, these hairs, these channels, these excesses, lasot behem din, he has to come and make judgment because he has that long hair, that capacity. V'alkein amru Chazal, our sages taught, Eliyahu kofato v'Kodesh Baruch Hu rotza'o. Right? Eliyahu pushes him over, and Hashem gives him a patch. Zeh b'chinat mochin, and this is the idea. The patch is when you get new mochin. Now, what does that mean? New mochin means new mental power. That sounds like a good thing. Why is that the punishment? Well, because when the new mochin entered, guess what you get? A new vision of yourself. And we get a vision of ourselves and how we fell. And that becomes the strap. Understand? The new mental power goes in to re-illuminate our brain to see where we've fallen. My God, what am I doing here? And that itself becomes the person's punishment. That mochin. Bechinat motre mochin. And it's coming from this idea of the excess. Because when a person's in the midst of excess, he doesn't think it's excess. He calls it fun. He calls it adventure, all kinds of pleasant names. But it's really excess of the Torah. And that, well, it brings out punishment. The punishment of mental awareness of what we've done. And kofato, this is the idea of Eliyahu ben over with these mochin. And bechinat tefillin, which is the idea of putting on tefillin. And this is the idea, it goes even further. Melech asur b'haratim, it says in the Tukuni Zohar. It's a verse from Shira Shirim. That God is bound in the runways, in the pathways. The Tukuni Zohar says, where is God bound? God's bound. God's infinite. How do we assert that God is bound? Because God is so infinite, he can enter the smallest places in the universe, even the pathways of our little minds. Melech asur b'rahatim. He's bound up in those pathways of the mind. And now you understand another verse in Shira Shirim. Etzitz min harakim. He peeks through the cracks. In the bind, not the binds, what are they called in modern, the blinds, the levelure, right? That God peeks through the cracks of the pathways. In other words, God is in your mind or you couldn't think. God is in your heart or you couldn't feel. But he's hidden. And our job is to pull away gently the shields, the defense mechanisms, the false ideas, the self-illusions, all the things that we carry around, sometimes for a couple lifetimes. We have to peel those back gently, and then we find Hashem is behind our thoughts, behind our feelings, behind our actions. Last night I was leaving Jerusalem with my wife, and there's always traffic in Jerusalem. They're building in the middle of the night, Saturday night. And we got stuck in traffic and a little bit way out of our way. And then I said, well, we're lost here. Let's just go to the Kotel. And we ended up going through all these Arab neighborhoods. It was quite an adventure. Ahmed's wild ride. And we were going through East Jerusalem to get back around to the Kotel from the wrong side. And I would never go that way in 1,000 years. But God took us that way to show me there's a way. But because I forgot that before Shabbat, I had said to my wife, let's go to the Kotel after Shabbat. And I forgot the idea. So Hashem took me there without me even knowing what I was doing. Because suddenly we showed up and there we are near the Kotel. It was fun. I said, you see, God brought us to the Kotel without Waze. Can you imagine driving without Waze? Does anybody do that anymore? It's such an adventure. But see, that's the idea of Amelech Asur B'Rahatim. The king is bound in the pathways of thought, and we don't even know what we're doing half the time. But when we trust him, he turns it good, especially when we have the right intention. And we should all be led to the Kotel every chance we get. Trust me, there is no better place on this planet to go. To open your heart and the mind. And so now, back to our metaphoric exploration here. So this man has married beneath himself. He's knowingly against the laws of Torah. He gets punished by his own mind expanding to see his mistake. And he doesn't really want what he has, and he doesn't even want the money he has, and he's in a mess. And but yet he's connected by the se'arot, these extensions of the mind, all the way from the tzaddik, hopefully the tzaddik of the generation, or a tzaddik in your town. We don't even know who the tzaddikim are anymore, half the time. Maybe more than half the time. But they're out there. Trust me. They're in Jerusalem. They're in Sfat. They're in Rabbi Shimon. They're in a lot of places. Places we'd never expect as well. But that's another story for another time. Okay. And so Eliyahu comes, he's gotten his judgment. And what happens? He relates it all to tefillin, because tefillin is these boxes right on the head that are bound with straps. Well, the straps are called ritzuot, lashon rotza'o. The straps that Hashem applies. Hashem doesn't come down with a big belt from heaven. He comes down with tefillin. He says, put these back on your head and don't take them off, and maybe you'll think the right thoughts and do the right things and not go for things that aren't good for you. And those are the ritzuot that are binding the mind where it needs to stay, not flying out of its box into fantasy and delusion. Shehem bechinat tefillin. And the rotzao is bechinat motorei mochin, the excess mind power, because everybody has like mental power. A lot of people, they can't sleep well because they don't use their mental power properly during the day. Bechinat rutzuot, and this is the bechinat motorei mochin, the excess mind. And it seems like, okay, what do I do? Avraham, what do I do with this Torah? I mean, it's a journey. It's a nightmare. Because it started out with a guy who steals from his wife. Steals from his wife. Well, that probably happens too. That's one aspect of the stealing, but also steals from his friend, steals from his boss, steals from his parents, steals from him. It's endless. But all of it takes away from the light of the feminine. Because God created man to give money to women, not to take. Not to take wives and not to take children and not to take anything. What do we need in this world? What do we really need? Need a shelter, need some clothes, need some decent, healthy food. Okay, electricity and water help, But what do we need? We need these books. We need these books, folks. We need these prayers. And then you get happiness, you get connected to Hashem, and then everybody else is around you is happy because you're doing your job. And if they're not, then you help them find out why. And oftentimes the motorei mochin is because a person is dissatisfied and he has excess mental energy that's not being applied somewhere useful. You don't have to look far for the example. You see kids. You watch kids. When they're active and busy and focused, they're wonderful. And when they have all this energy and power and no place to put it, oy vavoy, head to the hills. Right? And so adults are that way too. We just don't usually break our toys. Well, I guess we do if you count sports cars and yachts and who knows what that we don't take care of because the mind is not under the reins. The Zohar says that the mind is like a chariot on the loose. We've got to hold her in. And the tefillin, the mitzvot, the prayer, these are the basics. Okay, there's other great things that we can do as well. Eat right, exercise, sleep right, all the things that everybody knows. You hear it on every video. Every coach and advisor out there is telling you the same thing, more or less. Little adjustments. So Rabbi Nachman just wants to show us the spiritual roots and underpinning the truth beneath it all. That was built into the way we were made, the way creation was put together by this master of all master craftsmen. So we should be blessed, really, to accept and to love what we've been given. And if a person wakes up one morning and said, I married the wrong person, well, you know what? Maybe make it the right person. Make the changes in yourself to make yourself love that person. The Rebbe gave us an advice a couple of days ago. When a man is not in love with his wife, you know what he should do? Go out and give charity. Because the giving opens his heart, and the open heart then will return to his wife and love her again. So I hope these words reach you in a good place with a good week ahead of you, a wonderful week of expression, creativity. Hard work is a good thing too, if you love what you're doing. And if you don't love what you're doing, well, then call me. We'll make an appointment. Because that's one of the biggest problems in the world. We do things because we think we need to do them, and then we're unhappy. But let's do what we really, really were put here to do. So God bless you all. We'll see you again. Tomorrow's exciting because we start a new Torah, Likutei Moharan, Torah Ayin 70, It was on the 8th day that Moses called to Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he teaches us a very fascinating Torah about what is I call spiritual gravity. Just like there's gravity between objects, if I drop something, well, there's gravity between people as well. And because we're all little electromagnetic radio stations, right? We're just flying around each other. We'll try not to crash. God bless you all. So we're going to start that Torah tomorrow. Be there, and we'll see you again. Have a great week.